Okay, so this is going to be the video for total beginners. Well, not total beginners, but people who maybe don't understand a lot of the concepts in Scott Robertson's book quite yet. So I'm going to be covering the information which I assumed that you knew in the YouTube video. That is duplicating boxes. 1 point and 2 point perspective we'll touch on briefly, but I think there's so much content out there for that. I'll just direct you somewhere to go. And then drawing freehand boxes. So let's start out with this idea of duplicating boxes. So first we'll start with a rectangle. This is a flat rectangle. This is what a box looks like from the side. So here, this is my external hard drive. This will do. So this external hard drive, I mean, it's a small recording area, but you can imagine this thing's just a rectangle. It's a 3D shape that I can rotate anywhere. But from the side, if I look at it straight from the side, it's just a flat rectangle, just like in this picture here. So first step is to figure out how we can duplicate a flat rectangle. And to do that, we're going to cut it in half using an X. This is a really simple technique to find the middle of anything. The middle of any square or rectangle. If you just draw an X through it from corner to corner, the intersection of that X is going to be your midline. I shouldn't call it a midline, that's kind of confusing. It's going to be your midpoint, I guess. So this is exactly halfway. We've essentially cut this in half, and we can do this horizontally or vertically. But that's your halfway mark. And so this halfway mark is really useful because we can use the halfway point to duplicate. And using the same kind of, it's really based on the same kind of logic. If we draw a diagonal going from here, from this bottom corner, through that halfway point, and we continue it up, and then we pull this over, that should be exactly the same distance. So I think I am a little bit off there. Let's try it again. From this corner up through there. There we go. That looks better. It's very finicky. It's actually easier to do on paper, if you ask me. But you have to be very careful to keep this line completely straight, this one that goes through here. And you have to make sure it goes straight through the midpoint. Usually, you just kind of estimate it like afterwards. So after you do it, you'll just kind of look at it how I just did, and I'll say, that looks about right, or no, that doesn't look quite right. And so this should be exactly the same length here as it is over here. And that's how we duplicate a rectangle. Now, the useful thing about this is it also works in perspective. So let's start with a box. So here's a very simple box. Nothing pretty, nothing fancy, just a box like you drew in elementary school. And what I'm going to do is use the same logic that I did here and apply it to this box. So make an X, find the halfway points, now when you find this halfway point, you want to be careful that you're following the perspective. You've got a vanishing point over here somewhere. We'll talk about vanishing points in a second. But basically, you just want to make sure that you're in parallel, more or less, with these other lines. So here's our half point, here's our half point, here's our half, here's our half. All right, now let's use this to duplicate this box. I'm going to move it down a little bit so I have room. So same thing I did on the other example. And here, it's just in perspective. And so I can just carry this out. And we've got another box. And I can keep doing this. If I just keep these lines parallel, so the diagonals here, I can just keep going. Keep this going in the same direction. Got another one. And I could keep going and going. I could also extend going down vertically. So I could go from this corner through here, and where that intersects, got another box. So try this on a piece of copy paper. Just do this exercise over and over again. It's a really good way to improve your line quality with a pen. So you kind of get used to the dexterity it takes to use a pen properly. And it also helps you practice this tool. This is probably the most common tool that you will use in perspective. This box duplication is so ridiculously common, you will need it all the time. So very important stuff. Make sure you get this down. You can find more information about it on page 29 of Scott Robertson's book. He's got a step-by-step thing. Nothing too fancy. Hopefully you should get the hang of it pretty quickly. And it's fun to do. Oh, another good place to check this, to get lessons on this, is drawbox.com. And I'll be referencing that website a lot in this video. He has really good information on this box duplication. So the other thing I said is freehand boxes. So your first step, and you kind of needed it, I kind of apologize, you kind of needed to do this stuff, but I'm assuming most people can do freehand boxes, so I won't spend a whole long time on it. But you should be able to just draw a box in perspective without actually plotting anything out, just by eyeballing it. And this is pretty simple if you're just doing a standard box, but you should be able to do it from like any angle. So another really good place for this, go to drawbox.com. If you haven't done this a lot, don't assume it's beneath you. If you haven't gone through like actually doing these with the purpose of drawing, don't assume it's beneath you. Go to drawbox.com. Again, it's right here. And check out the 250 box challenge. The 250 box challenge, it's exactly what it sounds like. He's got a video to go along with it. He's got several good videos on drawing boxes and good exercises to improve your ability to draw a box. That's going to be really, you need to be able to do this. You need to be able to freehand boxes to even start doing any of the more complex stuff. Also, James has a cool exercise where he actually practices spinning a box. So modern day James, a lot of you are probably here from that channel. But he has some cool exercises where he'll take a box, and I'm just going to do this very quickly. But he'll take a box and then he'll rotate it in his mind. So then, and then he'll, I mean, this is a really ugly box, but I'm just going quickly. And he'll spin it, so now it's a little bit more sideways, if that makes sense. I think that's in his Perspective 1 video. But he does like a whole thing where he rotates it around and around and around. And that's a really good exercise to do. That's something I need to practice. So check out his videos as well. And then the final thing is 1-point and 2-point perspective. So 1-point perspective is just the idea that you've got one vanishing point. And then if you were to make a grid off of this vanishing point, it would look like this. So everything in perspective is converging to this one point. There's like examples. If you just go to Google and search 1-point perspective, you can see some really good examples. Like here's the first example on here. And so here you can see there's 1 point of perspective and everything kind of caters to that. It all points to that spot. There's a lot of information on this on page 16 of Scott Robertson's How to Draw book. James also covers this pretty adequately. That'll be linked in the document that comes along with this. But James has a perspective video where he explains 1-point and 2-point perspective pretty well as well. And if we were to like draw a box on this perspective, so here this is a horizon line. That's your horizon. This is your vanishing point. Your horizon line is your eye level, by the way. That's just kind of something to keep in mind. So if I were to be like higher up, this horizon is going to be lower. And so I could just draw a box. Just kind of do this exercise where you practice drawing boxes on this perspective grid. And all of these should be heading back all the way to that line, to that vanishing point. You know, you'll put a box there. Let's make another one. Should be going back to the vanishing point. Back to the vanishing point. You gotta kind of practice always making sure everything is heading back to the vanishing point. Making sure that that's going back to the vanishing point. So just make one of these. Grid this out. Do this all the time. Grid one out and just start placing boxes around it, because this is another way that you'll improve your line quality. And the more you do this, the better your perspective awareness is going to be. Your ability to tell when something's being drawn properly and when it's not being drawn properly. So this is incredibly important. And then I'm running out of room. I'm drawing way too big. Lastly, we're going to have 2-point perspective, and it's a similar idea. You're just going to have 2 vanishing points. So here's a vanishing point, and here's a vanishing point, and there we go. This time we're just gonna pull these all out this way. So make some of these now. And if I wanted to place a cube in here, I just follow the grid. Make sure that these lines are going back to this vanishing point, and these lines are going back to this vanishing point. So again, this one should be going to that vanishing point. This one should be going to that vanishing point. That one goes to this vanishing point, and there's my box. So make one of these and just start placing boxes randomly around it. Drawbox.com also has a lot of really good info on this. I don't want to spend the majority of this tutorial covering this stuff, just because when I was learning this stuff, I didn't have any trouble finding information on this. There's so much on 2-point perspective, it's ridiculous. You could probably find a Draw with Jazza video on this stuff. I mean, seriously. However, you're not going to find any videos on the other stuff we're covering. The more advanced material, really hard to find. Scott Robertson's about the only one. A little bit of Draw a Box, but I mostly want to focus on that stuff. This stuff you can pick up on your own pretty quickly just by reading Scott Robertson, watching a few YouTube videos because there's so much, and going to drawbox.com, watching James's video. You should be able to nail down this pretty well. So do this exercise. You could even incorporate the box duplication. So, maybe try and add box duplication to this. I'm just doing these quick and sloppy. So here now I just duplicated that box in perspective. Make some little 2-point perspective layouts like this. You should be able to make some little 1-point perspective layouts like this. You should be able to draw freehand boxes better than this. These are crappy freehand boxes. You should be able to duplicate boxes, and you should be able to duplicate rectangles. So that's a little brief summary of everything. I'll link to any resources I mentioned in the accompanying Word document that's going to come out with this. But hopefully that just about covers it. I think you guys shouldn't really struggle too much with any of this stuff. There's plenty out there. Once you feel like you've mastered this, feel free to move on to the more advanced stuff in part 1 and then eventually part 2. All right, thanks for watching.